This is Miss Boo.
I've been a teacher for several years now, and there's one thing I've learned. Sometimes it's harmless. Sometimes, not so much. Everyone agrees is. During my first year, one student brought a Stanley Cup filled with gasoline to school, poured it into every toilet in the boys' bathroom, and set the whole place on fire. His reasoning was that the bathrooms smelled terrible anyway, and if the toilets were destroyed, the school would finally be forced to renovate them. Honestly, he wasn't wrong. He still got expelled. The following year, there was a girl who kept breaking into other students' lockers just to leave rocks inside. Nobody ever figured out why. Then came a boy who loved sneaking up behind people and screaming directly into their ears. He got punched, a lot, before his parents finally got him into therapy. Then, during my fourth year, I met Simon Lynch. Before classes even started, several freshmen warned me about him. He's the weird one. Naturally, I expected trouble. But Simon wasn't anything like the others. He was polite, respectful, incredibly intelligent, and consistently one of the top students in school. He helped classmates, never caused problems, and honestly, every teacher loved having him in class. His only strange habit was constantly talking about something he called the God in the corner. At first, nobody really paid attention. He'd mention it so casually you'd think he was talking about a TV show or some strange internet myth. But the odd part was, he never stopped bringing it up. Before every exam, he'd tell the other students, if you make an offering to the God in the corner, you'll ace the test. Apparently, this mysterious God could do almost anything. Need to pass your driving test? It could help. Want clearer skin? It could do that too. Trying to lose weight? Heal your sick dog. Even fix problems doctors couldn't. According to Simon, nothing was impossible. Eventually, I'd had enough. I pulled him aside after class. Simon, I said, the classroom isn't the place for religious discussions. He just smiled. It's not a religion, Ms. Quinn. It's more like a cosmic force. You don't really pray to the God in the corner. You simply give it something. After that conversation, he stopped mentioning it for a while. At least, until Shannon came to school one morning. She looked happier than I'd ever seen her. Shannon had been legally blind for most of her life. Her eyesight had been getting worse every year, and doctors had already told her there was little they could do. The day before, she decided to listen to Simon. She baked a gooseberry pie. Then she took a watercolor painting she'd made herself, one she was especially proud of. She placed both gifts in the darkest corner of her bedroom, told the God in the corner what she wanted, and went to sleep. The next morning, she could see perfectly, not a little better, perfectly. Within days, the rumors spread through the entire school. The worst student in my class suddenly started getting straight A's. Another girl received a full scholarship to her dream university. Students claimed they'd grown taller, lost weight, cleared lifelong skin conditions, even discovered athletic talent they never knew they had. Everyone had a story. Everyone had a miracle. I kept telling myself it was all coincidence. It had to be. Then my boyfriend Kyle was hit by a distracted driver. The doctors managed to keep him alive, but they told me he would never wake up from the coma. That night, I called Simon. Teachers aren't supposed to call students outside of school. I knew that, but at that point, I didn't care anymore. The phone rang once, twice, then he answered. Hello? It's Miss Quinn, I said quietly. Before I could explain anything, he interrupted me. I heard about your boyfriend. You want to know how to make an offering? It wasn't a question. He already knew. Yes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Simon began explaining it as casually as if he were giving directions to the grocery store. Find a corner. It can be in your house or anywhere else. It just has to be dark, so dark that you can't really see what's inside anymore. Then leave it something you made, or something that truly matters to you. What do I say? I asked. You simply tell it. This is an offering to the God in the corner, then make your wish. He stopped for a second. Oh, there's one more thing. Never try to photograph it, never record it, and whatever you do, don't turn on the light. I felt my stomach tighten. What happens if someone does? My uncle tried. Simon didn't sound scared. He didn't sound sad. If anything, he sounded completely indifferent. We never saw him again. I think he's probably still alive. And honestly, I think that's worse. After the call ended, I sat there staring at my phone. Everything about this was insane. I was a teacher, an adult, a rational person, and yet I was actually considering asking some unknown thing living in the corner of a room to save the man I loved. I looked around my apartment, searching for something worthy of offering. Then I remembered. Under my bed was a small lockbox. Inside was my father's wristwatch. It had belonged to my grandfather before him. After my father passed away, it became the most precious thing I owned. I held it in my hands for a long time. Giving it away felt like losing my father all over again. But if it meant saving Kyle, I already knew what I was going to do. I walked into my bedroom. The far corner was almost completely hidden in darkness. I placed the watch on the floor, took one slow breath, and whispered, "This is an offering to the God in the corner. Please, save Kyle." For several seconds, nothing happened. I actually started feeling embarrassed. Maybe Simon had fooled everyone. Maybe I'd completely lost my mind. Then the darkness moved. Not something inside it, the darkness itself. Two impossibly long gray arms slowly reached out from the shadow. Their fingers were thin, almost elegant. They picked up my father's watch, held it for a moment, as though something hidden inside the darkness was carefully examining it. Then I heard it, a whisper, so quiet I couldn't understand a single word, but somehow it sounded pleased. The hand slowly disappeared back into the corner. The watch was gone. I couldn't move. For several seconds I just stared at the darkness. Then panic finally caught up with me. I ran out of the bedroom and slammed the door behind me. About 20 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Kyle's mother. She was crying. "Maddie, you need to get to the hospital." My heart stopped. Oh God, did he die? No, he's awake. He's asking for you. The doctors had absolutely no explanation. Kyle made a full recovery. Within a few years, we got married, started a family. Life slowly returned to normal. Simon graduated at the top of his class. Years later, he founded a technology company people now compare to Tesla. Sometimes I still see him on television, confident, successful, smiling. And every single time, I find myself wondering, just how powerful is the God in the corner?
I've hated hospitals for as long as I can remember. The smell, the fluorescent lights, the endless waiting. Some of the worst moments of my life happened inside one. My grandfather died in a hospital. Years later, my father suffered a heart attack in another. So, naturally, I became a doctor. I know how ridiculous that sounds. Maybe part of me wanted to believe hospitals could also be places where people were saved, places where someone like me could actually make a difference. After graduating medical school, I accepted a position at a small hospital in my hometown. The pay was surprisingly good. It was close enough to walk to, and despite the rumors people told about the place, I wasn't worried. They claimed patients sometimes waited decades for treatment, that doctors amputated limbs over minor infections. It sounded like nothing more than stupid local gossip. Then I started my first day. Surprisingly, everything felt normal. I spent hours treating coughs, headaches, prescription renewals, nothing unusual. Right before my shift ended, an elderly woman walked into my office. She was so thin, her clothes barely stayed on her frame. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Penton," I said. "How can I help you?" "One of the doctors told me to come for my prescription." "Which doctor?" She stared at me for several seconds. "I don't remember." "What medication do you need?" "The red pills." I turned toward my computer. "Let me check your file." Before I could touch the keyboard, her hand wrapped around my wrist. "No." She looked impossibly frail, but her grip hurt. "There's no need to check anything, honey. Just give me the pills." Then I noticed her eyes. I still can't explain what I saw. The color wasn't changing exactly. It just looked wrong. Like something dark was moving beneath the surface before disappearing again. I tried pulling my hand away. She squeezed even harder. Then another doctor walked into the room. He looked at her for less than a second. "Astrosome?" he asked. The old woman's entire face lit up. "Yes!" she shouted happily. The doctor scribbled something onto a prescription pad, handed it to her, and she calmly walked away. I just stood there staring at him. What the hell was that? He kept gathering equipment from a cabinet. "New here?" "Yeah. She has acute reditis." And then he walked out. After my shift, I searched every medical database I had access to. Astrosome, nothing. Reditis, nothing. It was as if neither word existed. But when I checked the hospital's internal system, both were there. Astrosome had no listed ingredients. No manufacturer, no explanation. The entire description consisted of 2 words: red pills. Mrs. Penton's medical records didn't make any sense either. According to the hospital, she'd only existed since the age of 74, even though she was listed as 98 years old. I kept telling myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe the software was broken. Maybe the medication was experimental. Maybe I'd misunderstood something. Looking back, that became the most normal day I ever had in that hospital. About a week later, I was finishing paperwork when I heard people running through the hallway. Not one person, not 2, dozens. Nurses, doctors, janitors, interns. Everyone was rushing toward the main entrance. Nobody was screaming, but every face looked terrified. I stepped into the hallway and grabbed a nurse by the arm. "What's happening?" He pulled away immediately. "Let go. It's almost 8. I looked at the wall clock. 7:57 p.m. So, they forgot to adjust the clocks after daylight savings. The alarm should have gone off 30 minutes ago. What alarm? He didn't answer. He just kept running. I followed everyone toward the exit. People abandoned paperwork, medical carts, half-finished coffees. Nobody stopped for anything. One doctor dropped an entire stack of patient files onto the floor and didn't even look back. As we reached the entrance, a security guard was holding the doors open. "Move!" he shouted. 3 minutes. I turned around. The hallway behind us had become strangely quiet. Then, somewhere deep inside the hospital, I heard the sound of metal scraping across the floor. Then another. A nurse standing beside me suddenly started crying. "What's making that noise?" I asked. She never looked at me. The patients are getting up. Nobody talked about what happened that night. The next morning, the hospital was completely normal again. Nurses smiled, doctors drank coffee, patients sat quietly in the waiting room. It was as if everyone had agreed to pretend nothing had happened. I finally asked one of the senior doctors about it. "What happens after 8? He barely looked up from his paperwork. "You left before 8, didn't you?" "Yeah." "Then don't worry about it." That was the entire conversation. I wanted to quit that day. I really did. But the pay was good, and I kept convincing myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe everyone was playing some cruel joke on the new guy. Maybe I'd misunderstood what I'd heard. So I stayed. Looking back, that was probably the biggest mistake of my life. A few months later, an emergency patient was rushed into the operating room. Middle-aged man, severe abdominal pain. I'd never heard anyone scream like that before. The surgeon examined him for less than a minute. We're opening him up. Everything happened so fast. Within minutes, his abdomen was open. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Blood, organs, exactly what you'd expect. Then something moved. The surgeon reached inside the man's stomach and slowly pulled out something long, black, and twisting. At first, I thought it was some kind of parasite. Then I noticed the legs. Hundreds of tiny legs running along both sides of its body. It writhed in the surgeon's hands, desperately trying to crawl back into the man's stomach. Near the end of its body, there was something that looked disturbingly similar to a feather. Nobody reacted. Nobody screamed. Nobody asked what it was. The surgeon simply looked at it and calmly said, "It's old." I remember thinking, old? What the hell does that even mean? Before I could ask, a nurse walked into the operating room carrying a metal bucket filled with ice water. Something was moving inside it. She reached in with a pair of forceps and lifted out another creature. It looked exactly the same. Same body, same legs, same feather, only smaller. She handed it to the surgeon. "This one's new," she said. He nodded. "Much better." I didn't wait to see what happened next. I walked out of the operating room, walked straight to administration, typed my resignation, cleared out my office, and I never went back. For the first time in months, I slept peacefully. I kept telling myself it was over, that whatever was happening inside that hospital was no longer my problem. Then yesterday, I noticed a tiny blister on my leg. At first, I assumed it was an insect bite. By evening, it had doubled in size. Its color kept changing. Green, purple, yellow, red, almost beautiful to look at. Then I remembered something I'd overheard during my final week at the hospital. One of the nurses had laughed while saying it. If it's blue, get out of the room. I looked back down at my leg. The colors had stopped changing. The blister was blue.
I watched 6 people disappear into the green hallway. Nobody ever came back. The company called it termination. Yesterday, my best friend smiled at me, stood up from her chair, and walked in there, willingly. I tried to stop her. I lost my arm instead. But I should probably explain how I ended up working at that factory in the first place. I got the job through my friend Jenna. I had been unemployed for a few weeks after an incident at my previous building involving immigration officers. I was technically supposed to let them inside. I didn't. That story isn't important. What matters is that I needed money, and Jenna told me the toy factory was hiring. I already knew she worked in some kind of factory, but she rarely talked about it. Whenever I asked what she did there, she would just say, "Quality control." I pictured conveyor belts, cardboard boxes, maybe stuffed animals missing an eye. I never imagined the place would be interesting. My job was to test toy cars. That was it. A large metal basket traveled into our room on a set of rails. The basket was always filled with detailed plastic replicas of real cars and trucks. Some were no bigger than my thumb. Others were large enough to hold with both hands. My 10 co-workers and I would grab them as quickly as possible, push each one across the metal table, and check whether the wheels turned properly. If a car rolled smoothly, we placed it in a second basket on another set of rails. That basket carried the toys toward packaging. If the wheels locked, dragged, or made the smallest clicking sound, we put the car back into the original basket. When the basket was full, it traveled through a narrow doorway at the back of the room and disappeared down what everyone called the green hallway. Nothing ever returned from the green hallway. I assumed the rejected toys were melted down or recycled. The baskets had to loop back eventually, but none of us had ever seen where the rails ended. In fact, nobody I worked with had ever seen the loading dock. I worked there for weeks and never saw a truck arrive. I never saw anyone deliver plastic, paint, wheels, or boxes. The toy cars simply appeared. Full baskets came through one wall, empty baskets returned through another. The factory operated 24 hours a day, but nobody seemed to know where anything began. There was only one rule everybody took seriously: never enter the green hallway. The name made it sound more interesting than it was. It wasn't bright green or covered in vines. It was just a long, narrow corridor painted a dull, faded green. The paint had darkened around the corners, and the fluorescent lights inside always seemed weaker than the ones in our workroom. From my chair, I could see about 20 feet into it before the hallway bent sharply to the left. I once asked Jenna what happened to the employee I had replaced. We were both working while we talked, grabbing cars, spinning wheels, sorting them without stopping. The production screen mounted above us tracked everything. If our hands slowed down, the numbers turned red. "What happened to the guy who had this station before me?" I asked. Jenna shrugged without looking up. "He was fired." "Why?" "He went into the green hallway." Brenda, an older woman working across from us, shouted, "I told him not to!" Nobody laughed. Nobody added anything else. We just kept working. The factory maintained a strict schedule. We were expected to test hundreds of toys every hour. After my first week, my fingers went numb at night. After the second, pain started running from my wrist into my elbow. Everyone had some kind of injury: carpal tunnel, tendinitis, swollen joints. Tyler wore braces on both hands. Brenda had to tape 2 of her fingers together before every shift. The company's medical policy stated that repetitive strain injuries were caused by incorrect personal technique. In other words, the pain was our fault. The screen reminded us of that whenever productivity dropped. Maintain proper posture, work safely, work quickly. My first 2 weeks were almost ordinary. Painful, repetitive, exhausting, but ordinary. Then one morning, a basket came back from the green hallway. At first, I thought I had imagined it. The rejected baskets always disappeared through the green doorway. They never reversed direction. But this one rolled slowly back into our room, making a faint metallic squeal. Everyone stopped working. The screen immediately flashed red. Production delay detected. The basket was empty, except for one small red car sitting in the center. Jenna stared at it. Brenda stared at it. Nobody moved. Has that happened before? I asked. Jenna shook her head. I reached toward the car. She grabbed my wrist. Don't! It's just a toy. Leave it. The screen flashed again. Resume testing. So I picked it up. The car was warm. Not slightly warm from machinery. It felt like someone had been holding it tightly in both hands. I almost dropped it. Feel this, I told Jenna. She stepped away from me. I placed the car on the table and pushed it. It rolled perfectly. All 4 wheels moved without resistance. According to our rules, it belonged in the good basket. Nobody told me what else to do, so I put it there. The moment it landed among the other toys, the lights above the green hallway flickered. Somewhere inside the corridor, a child laughed. It was distant and soft, the kind of laugh you might hear from another room in a house. I turned toward the hallway. Did you hear that? Everyone was already working again. Jenna's hands moved faster than before. Hear what? She asked. I knew she was lying. After that, small things began happening. Rejected cars occasionally returned with different paint. A black truck came back white. A yellow taxi returned with every window painted over. Once, I sent down a blue sports car with a missing wheel. 10 minutes later, it returned in the good basket with all 4 wheels attached. There were fingerprints pressed into the plastic roof. Tiny fingerprints, smaller than a child's. I showed Jenna. She looked at the camera above us and quietly said, "Stop paying attention." How am I supposed to stop paying attention to this? That's how people keep their jobs. The following Monday, I arrived after my weekend and found 2 empty chairs. Jenna was already working. Her eyes were red, and she looked as though she hadn't slept. "Where are Michelle and Jason?" I asked. "Fired. Both of them?" "No reason given." She kept sorting cars. "People are saying the company can't afford this many employees anymore." I looked at the production stream. Our hourly target had not changed. 11 people had barely managed to meet it. Now there were 9. The screen displayed a cheerful message above the numbers. A smaller team creates stronger teamwork. The work became faster. Our breaks became shorter. Every few minutes, the screen reminded us that failing to meet the target could affect future staffing decisions. At the end of the week, my right hand was so swollen I couldn't close it fully. Jenna wrapped it in cold paper towels during lunch. "You should see a doctor," she said. "When?" I asked. She didn't answer. A week later, Brenda's chair was empty. Jenna told me she had been fired too. The target remained the same. We were down to 8. Then Matt disappeared. 7. Nobody said they had seen him leave. His jacket was still hanging behind his station. His coffee was still on the floor beneath his chair. When I asked our supervisor, the screen displayed a new line of text. "Former employees are no longer relevant to production." That was when the sounds from the green hallway became more frequent. Scraping. Wheels rolling slowly over concrete. A child humming the same 3 notes again and again. Sometimes I heard somebody whispering names, not random names, our names. Jenna, Tyler, Brenda. The others pretended not to hear it. Tyler began wearing headphones without music playing. Jenna started sitting with her back angled away from the hallway. One night, near the end of our shift, a basket entered the room later than usual. It contained only one toy, a dark blue sedan. I recognized it before I even touched it. It was the same make of model as your car, same year, same faded paint. There was even a thin silver scratch along the driver's door where I had hit a concrete pillar 2 winters earlier. I looked toward Jenna. She had gone completely still. "That's my coach," I said. "Don't touch it." How would they know what my car looks like? "Put it in the rejected basket." I picked it up anyway. The doors opened. The coping wheel turned. Inside, there was a tiny coffee cup in the cup holder and a folded jacket on the passenger seat. Both matched the ones I had left in my actual car that morning. My hands beyond the shake. I turned the toy over. Something catching into the purchasing underneath. Not printing by a machine, carved by hand, my full name. Beneath it, in Colorado letters, were 4 words. "Ready for the green hallway." I must have read those words 20 times. Ready for the green hallway. My own name had been carved into the plastic underneath the toy car. Not printed, not stamped by a machine. Carved, one uneven letter at a time, as if someone had done it with a pocket knife. I looked around the room. Nobody reacted. The others kept sorting cars with the same mechanical rhythm they always had. Wheels, basket, wheels, basket. Jenna wouldn't even look at me. "Jenna," she finally whispered without raising her head. "Put it back. How did they make this? Don't ask questions you don't want answered." I laughed. Not because anything was funny. It was the kind of laugh your body forces out when your brain refuses to accept what it's seeing. "That's my car." Jenna closed her eyes for a second. "I know." "How do you know?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached over, took the miniature sedan from my hands, and dropped it into the rejected basket. The moment the plastic touched the pile of defective toys, the basket jerked forward on its rails and disappeared into the green hallway. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went outside 3 different times just to make sure my real car was still parked where I'd left it. It was. Same scratch, same cracked taillight, same empty coffee cup inside. I kept telling myself someone at the factory had somehow seen it in the parking lot. Maybe they had cameras outside too. Maybe somebody was playing a joke. But there was one detail I couldn't explain. Inside, the tiny toy version had been my jacket. The same old brown jacket I'd forgotten on the passenger seat that morning. Nobody should have known it was there. The next morning, another chair was empty. Tyler. Nobody mentioned him. Nobody asked where he had gone. His wrist braces still hung over the back of his chair. His water bottle was still half full. The production screen simply displayed a cheerful message. "Congratulations! Increased efficiency has been achieved." We were down to 6 employees. The hourly quota increased by 12%. After lunch, I heard the humming again. 3 notes. Always the same 3 notes. This time, it was louder. Close enough that I could tell it wasn't echoing through the hallway anymore. It was coming from somewhere just around the corner. I looked toward Jenna. She had stopped moving. Her eyes were fixed on the green doorway. Very quietly, she asked, "Do you remember your first day here?" "Of course." "No," she swallowed. "I mean, before that." "What? Do you remember applying for this job?" I frowned. "You told me about it." "Did I?" I opened my mouth to answer. Then I stopped. I remembered being unemployed. I remembered meeting Jenna for coffee. I remembered walking into the factory for orientation. But I couldn't remember filling out an application. I couldn't remember an interview. I couldn't remember signing a contract. "That's impossible," I muttered. Jenna nodded without looking at me. "That's what I thought too. I don't remember how I got hired either." Something rolled out of the green hallway. Not a basket, just a single toy truck. It slowly crossed the floor until it stopped between our stations. Nobody moved. I bent down and picked it up. It was heavier than it should have been. Much heavier. I turned it over. Another name had been carved underneath. Tyler's. The truck's passenger window was cracked exactly the same way Tyler's real pickup truck had been cracked after someone threw a rock through it last winter. I knew because he'd shown me pictures on his phone. Jenna slowly reached over and closed my hand around the toy. "Don't let the cameras see you looking." I glanced up. Every camera in the room had turned toward us at exactly the same time. That was the first moment I realized the cameras weren't recording us. They were watching us. The doctor prescribed stronger painkillers the following week. My hands shook even before work started. I couldn't straighten 3 fingers anymore. Half the staff wore bandages. One man from another section had started using voice to text because his hands no longer worked well enough to type. Nobody quit. Nobody even talked about quitting. They either disappeared or those sides. A month later, the production screen changed again. "Beginning tomorrow, all employees will work 7 days a week. Together, we can exceed expectations." Nobody complained. Nobody had enough energy left. We just stared at the words. Jenna smiled. It was the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. "Remember that meteor shower?" she asked quietly. I blinked. "When we skipped school?" She nodded. "You were terrified your parents would find out." I laughed. "They did." "Yeah." She smiled a little wider. "That was the happiest day of my life." I didn't know what to say. She picked up another toy car, tested the wheels, dropped it into the good basket, picked up another, did the same thing. Then she looked at me. "Thank you for giving me one good memory." She stood up calmly. No tears, no panic. She walked toward the green hallway without looking back. "Jenna!" I shouted, knocking over my chair. Nobody else reacted. She reached the doorway. I sprinted after her. She disappeared around the corner. I stretched my arm as far as I could. My fingertips brushed the fabric of her sleeve. She never turned around. I pulled my arm back. Everything below my shoulder was gone. There was no blood, no exposed bone, just smooth skin, as though I'd been born that way. I stared at the empty sleeve hanging from my shirt. I couldn't even feel pain, only weight, the impossible weight of something that no longer existed. Every monitor in the room changed at once. Instead of production numbers, a single sentence appeared across every screen. "Employee terminated. Unauthorized contact with the green hallway." Nobody looked at me. They simply kept testing toy cars. Wheels, basket, wheels, basket. I never saw Jenna again.
If this story gave you chills, don't forget to subscribe, because the next one might be even worse.